Good afternoon, listeners. This is David Wright here. I'm your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital podcast. And this afternoon or this morning on the West Coast, I'm joined by Stephen Michaels. Stephen, it's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate the chance to speak today. Love the podcast and
Yeah.
looking forward to
So,
it.
Stephen, tell me a little bit about your current role. You're at SCL, right?
That's correct. So currently, I am the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for SCL Health, and that role is traditional in its structure, not really traditional in the way that we deliver technologies. We've always been very innovative and doing different approaches. So, but I have the data center technologies, network, server, storage, service desk, the caregiver experience group, and stuff like that. So,
Excellent. Yeah,
yeah,
I'll look forward to understanding a little bit more about that caregiver experience. But before we get into that, what's one piece of actionable advice you could look to give our listeners today?
actionable advice. So, are you specifically asking about what they may get out of the podcast, or just
I would
advice
say
in
just
general?
advice in general.
Okay. Well, I would say never stop being a student. One of the things that has really driven me in my career and life is just a thirst for knowledge. I'm always reading something, always trying to consume something new. And it's kind of funny when I went through my academic, like college, and then kind of working on the graduate degree and stuff like that. It's funny that about every year or so, I get this motivation to try to learn something new. Like I'm going to focus on getting my Six Sigma certification. That's something I did, many years ago. So, but the things like that have kind of always came up, and it has helped me in the workplace and in my personal life because there's two forms of student for me. There's the student in kind of my personal life of trying to be a better person spiritually and stuff like that. But from a professional perspective, I always try to read and understand what's new and what's going on, and leadership books and things like that. And it's kind of interesting how that generates. I could be reading a book about, like, for example, I was most recently reading a book called The Digital Body Language. And it's a great book, by the way. And it kind of talks about post COVID digital world that we live in. But it helps generate ideas for the workplace, even if it has nothing to do about the topic. So that'd be my advice: is
I
never
love
stop
that.
being a student.
I love that you touched on the spiritual element too. I mean, for me, I am a student of the world. I'm also I got advice years ago to continue reading. I try to read a book every week or two. But for me, being grounded in gratitude and having a spiritual connection is just paramount. Without it, I can't do anything else. So, um,
Yeah, yeah, same here. I mean, I'm a Christian by faith, and that kind of being able to be grounded in something that's bigger than yourself, whatever that is for you, is to me super important, because otherwise you get hung up on the details in life that really at the end of the
yeah.
day don't really matter much.
And as a leader, sometimes I'll get sucked into that success and that achievement, and it's just, I mean, it's important to have drive and ambition, but what's it all for if you're not grounded in what's really important? Which for me is faith and
That's right.
love and family. Um,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
Stephen, tell me a little bit about where you started out. How did you get to where you are now, and how did your career begin in IT?
Yeah, great question. So for me, my career was sort of dictated for me based upon an examination that I took when I entered the Air Force. Well, it was two factors really. So one of them was the fact that I had took this test that they give every new recruit, and that test determines like whether you're in engineering or you have some other type of background, and so I scored really high in engineering and mechanical, But the other part about that, your career path, is your physical ability to do certain things. And in my case, I had no idea, but apparently I had a slight hearing loss, which, my wife today will, tell you is selective. But the but the fact is that they wouldn't let me work on aircraft because of the noise, and so that automatically put me down kind of this technical path. And I would say that it worked pretty well because I was like a fish in water, and loved being a part of technology. This would have been 1992, and so that was pretty early on from a small computing perspective. The terminals that were on the desks and stuff like that were, most of them were old school, but it was kind of the birth of Windows. And so that was a lot of fun to be a part of at the time because it was really changing the environment. And then, like, what's fascinating is, so fast forward a few years, I get one of these, mysterious phone calls that recruited me into special operations in the military, and I had to go through this whole process of where they try to figure out, like, my abilities and that sort of stuff. But that part of my life was really instrumental because in the special operations world, the whole purpose is that you're doing things that are non-standard
Yeah.
and had not been done before, right? Or just are unique. And what that did for my career was just helped kind of tool this ability to kind of be innovative and come up with creative ideas that aren't always technical per se. Sometimes they can be simple, but it really helped guide my path. And I've been able to kind of springboard off of that. And so I spent years in the telecommunications industry for a while. And then I got into healthcare about a decade ago, well, probably a little more than a decade ago. And I started off in pharmaceutical, and then I got into healthcare delivery about 5 years ago. So, and what's interesting is that, and this will be my advice to anybody, is be selective about where you want to work, because, like, when I think about my days of being in special operations, it was really long days, a lot of being away from the family and those sort of things. But one of the hardest working times of my life, but also one of the funnest, because I absolutely loved what I did. I believed in what I was doing. And I found that again when I got into healthcare, specifically healthcare delivery, because of just the sheer impact that my role and my team's role make on patient care. And so when you think about our families, and when you come to a hospital or a doctor's office, in most cases, it's not a joyous occasion
Right.
unless you're having a baby, right? And so, but it's really, really important that when you do come into one of our facilities, that you're not disrupted by technology issues or having some sort of thing like that. That absolutely would be a failure as far as I'm concerned. And so we work hard to make sure
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. And so, so yeah, but and then from a technical perspective, I've done just about everything. Like, I've, from desktop computers to databases, software development, infrastructure, you name it. And that's been another blessing that I had, was just being able to kind of do different segmentations along my career.
Very cool. You touched on a few things, but I'll throw this question out there. What's one of the most important things that you've learned in your life, either professionally or personally, and what was like life like before learning it and after learning it?
Well, that's honestly an easy one. It is that I learned to not worship other things besides the one thing I'm supposed to worship. And in my life, I was a kind of a workaholic and an overachiever. And what that turned into in my life was I started to worship my work. And um, I one of the It's kind of funny. Like, one of the best things that's ever happened to me is I lost my job, and um, people have said that before, and it never made sense to me. But, like, in my career, I had always moved very fast and rapid, throughout my career, and then an organizational change occurred, and next thing you know, I'm on the market. And that was like devastating for me, but it was a true soul searching moment to where I had to realize that there was a greater power that, had my life in mind, that gave me my life, and that was way more important than my job. And what's crazy is that I think it really made me better at work, because the fact of the matter is that if you're constantly focused on something and over worried about it, you
Yep.
become less effective. And that was really probably the biggest thing that ever happened in my life. Is besides, like, getting married and having kids and stuff like that. I mean, those are the really important things. But just from a career perspective, kind of getting away from really worshiping work was really
Yeah.
the best thing.
I mean, I actually had, came to that realization years ago. And then since founding Disruptive Innovations in the beginning of 2018, obviously being an entrepreneur, scaling a company, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in that mindset. And my wife sent me a podcast on workaholism the other day, and I started reading a book by a Harvard professor named Arthur Brooks. It's called From Strength to Strength, and it's about kind of this the two intelligence curves we have in life, and how if you're, well, I should just say, for me, relevant to what you said, if I'm driven from a place of fear, losing what I have or not getting what I think I need, um, it's not a great place to be. And I had one of the largest meetings of my career. It went great, and being that I had lost focus, I realized, like, well, what does that mean if I'm not prioritizing the things that are truly important in life? So I appreciate that
Yeah.
advice. Um, so let's talk a little bit about a failure that you've experienced. What's one of your biggest learning moments from a failure that you had across the course of your career or your life?
The biggest failure that I had was taking a position for the money. And it was actually when I left the Air Force. I was kind of at a turning point in my career that I either had to decide, was that going to be my career till I retired, or was I going to leave? And so in my situation, because I had this amazing security clearance because of what I was doing, and I had IT experience, I became a really good candidate to be a defense contractor working in DC. And so I took a job, and like literally from Friday to Monday, my pay triples. And so just thought it was going to be amazing. What it turned out to be was and I won't disclose who I was working for or anything like that, just to protect the situation, I guess. But I could be doing that job today, going into that office, doing nothing, and I'm not so sure, David, anybody would even notice. I probably could still be doing that today. And that was the worst. I mean, it was the worst. Like I literally was looking for things to do. I would go to the data center and like help the junior engineers build servers. Like I was like so, but it was one of those things where I should have paid attention more about what the role was and how meaningful it was going to be. And I think that um, that was one of those things that I've carried with me. And for me, the failure was that I kind of moved my family and kind of made this whole trek, only to get there and realize, oh my goodness, I'm just not happy. I'm not happy. This isn't great. And then I had to kind of uproot the family and kind of move again, after suffering through it for a little while. But it was one of those things that I've carried with me to know that find something that you're going to be happy doing, and then let the money thing work itself out. Don't chase the money just to chase a dollar, because it doesn't really pay good dividends. You'll just find more junk to spend that money
Yep,
on anyway.
love that. So I want to get into a little bit more about SCL. I know you guys have a lot of stuff going on. Before that, we mentioned, being a student of the world. Kind of, what's one of your favorite books or blogs that you're into right now?
So, one of my favorite books or series of books is the Patrick Lencioni series. He's like one of my favorite. The five dysfunctions and the speed of trust and those. I definitely love. Um, I'm not a fiction reader. I don't really get into reading fiction books. His books are fable based, so they're sort of fiction, but they're based on business improvement principles and things like that. So I really kind of like those. I had a former boss. His name was Sandy Piscitello, and we actually lost Sandy this year. It was just instrumental in my career, and that's who introduced me to Patrick Lencioni and his books. But I am constantly reading different stuff, and it's one of those things. Like I said, I just recently finished the digital body language, which is a good one. I actually there's an author. Her name is Lovey Ajayi. It's Lovey with two U's. And so I recently completed one of her books. It's called The Professional Troublemaker, and it was so interesting to get her perspective of what it's like to be in the workplace. And in her case, she's an African American female. She her family is from Uganda, and man, it just like really opened my eyes to one, how privileged my life has been because of some of the things that she had to go through, be trying to be in the workplace with who she was, that really I never have had to worry about. Like there's just certain things that it just has never been a concern of mine. But it was just really fascinating. And so I found one of her older books recently. In fact, and that's the reason I brought it up is actually I'm actually reading her book from 2016 called "I'm Judging You," and it's more about like people. It's people's personalities and the types of friends you have and that sort of. So it's not really a business book. I'm only halfway through it, unless she gets to business at the end. But I'm
No,
halfway through
that's
that
great.
one.
I mean, I love this question because I always get a book or two that I can pick up after the podcast. So thank you for that. Um, so
Sure.
so
Yeah.
you're CTO of SCL. Um, you guys obviously big news. You're merging with Intermountain, which is huge. Um, let's talk a little bit about your vision. What's your vision for SCL moving forward?
Yeah, so the vision that we have is to really focus on serving our communities, continuing to focus on healthcare, and what's interesting is that in our world we have a mix of urban settings, like we have St. Joseph's that's in downtown Denver, and we have very rural settings where we have a hospital in Miles City, Montana, which is a really small community, and so we really get the full spectrum of that. And really the focus that so I've been here 3 years, and so me and my peers and stuff in technology has really just looked at ways to innovate the organization. And SCL Health has been just an amazing organization to embrace a lot of the change and so forth that we bring. And it's kind of with the Intermountain piece and the merger, kind of the way that whole thing came about was just through a conversation and at the very highest levels. And the conversation was how much the two organizations are alike. And so the unlike is that SCL Health was a Catholic health organization, and Intermountain is secular. And so the bridging of the two organizations, we're keeping our Catholic foundation for like St. Joseph's and all those hospitals. That doesn't change. But we kind of went overnight from being, 8 hospitals, supporting 3 states, to being the 11th largest healthcare um, system in the country from a nonprofit perspective, 14th if you add in the profits. But this is the first true merger that I've been a part of. Most companies I've worked for, we would have mergers and acquisitions, and sometimes the acquisition would be referred to as a merger. And even though Intermountain was much larger to a certain degree, a lot of it had to do with the fact that they have a health
Right.
plan and some other stuff like that. But it truly was a merger. There was just a merger of the organization. Our new executive team is almost equally split between the two companies and stuff like that. And so a lot of our focus has kind of been on kind of getting through day one, which happened a few weeks ago, and getting the teams together and structured and who reports to who, but also from a collaboration and technology perspective, it's super, super important that, we can see each other's calendars and we can, communicate with each other and chat and that sort of stuff. So a lot of that work has been underway and really made for a very successful day one. But we'll continue to focus on kind of bridging the technology stacks together. So that'll be a lot of effort for us. The good news is there's a lot of similarities in that space. I think there'll be a tremendous amount of synergies to make that happen. And, but again, at the end of the day, for us, it's all about the patients and the patients' families. And so that is really our focus above all else, is making sure that everything that we have in place is working like it should, and that we create the correct um, um, level of effort and response to the people that are actually, physicians and nurses that are providing that care. I can't emphasize enough how important
Yeah,
that
you,
is
you
to us.
touched on caregiver experience earlier. Could you expand on the importance of that for SCL a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things that is, like I said, very important to us is we don't just want to be a support mechanism for the organization, right? So the way that our organization is structured, the technology actually falls under strategy, and so that's super important because we have matured to that level so that we're a part of the conversation as an organization of where that strategy goes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to what does the physician get, or the nurse get, or the teams at the hospitals and doctors' offices. Like at the end of the day, what are they getting? And we have, a traditional setup. We have service desk and we have desk side teams and that sort of stuff. But we've tried to go for a step further and really kind of go from being, a great response team, but try to be proactive and make sure that when a physician does contact us, it's more of an exception than the rule. And man, when you really start fishing for things, it's amazing what you can find. You know, for example, we've started looking into when people are hired. And man, when you start looking at like, hey, day one of an employee to the organization, we call our associates caregivers. So a caregiver comes into organization, and it doesn't matter if you're finance or you're a brain surgeon. You come in and you start getting access, whatever. And almost every organization I've worked for, there's a pattern, and the pattern is that almost immediately within your first few days, you have to contact IT, right? And so we've really tried to focus on streamlining the disruptions that occur and make it frictionless so that you can kind of come in and do your job and that sort of thing. Same with the way that we respond, is we're trying to be frictionless. Like we introduced chat and chat bots and stuff like that so that you're not waiting on someone, you're able to just get an answer right away. And so it's really kind of a vision that I have, is to change the whole caregiver experience in regards to how they consume technology. And one of the things that we've started is we actually have, we call it a tech deck. And it's similar to the Apple Genius Bar, where it kind of removes the doors where IT is hiding behind the walls to being a walk-up service. And so it really, like in the office I'm in here, there is a walk-up. We call it the tech deck. We let the team pick the name, but it is where you can just walk up and get services. Again, it's all about removing the friction of either having to pick up the phone or whatever. If it's more convenient for you to just walk up and request what you need, then we're there for you. And so if it's better for you to call in, we're there for you as there as well. If you prefer to chat, we can do that as well. But again, like we're constantly looking for patterns of what's causing these disruptions so that we can remove those frictions in the first place, so that hopefully we love to hear from you, but we also don't want to hear from you. We'd rather
Yeah.
you be able to do your job.
I love that on a number of different levels. I mean, first you talked about how the fact that digital and IT need to be fully integrated into the health system strategy, right? And I think the fact that you guys are taking that holistic approach is so crucial right now in when it comes to really truly optimizing the patient experience as well as the caregiver experience. And I
And that's huge for us, because what's interesting about digital transformation, right, is digital transformation is a generational thing, is the way I see it, right? And depending on where you are in the generational spectrum, either you were born into a world where digital already existed, like my sons. I've got both my sons are in college, and or you were born into a world where it didn't exist. And kind of depending on how your journey has been is going to be very important to how you want to interact. So, for example, my sons will absolutely not order food from a place where you have to call a phone number and
it,
actually talk to somebody, right? And so, and I'm kind of in the middle, right? So, in a similar fashion, if I'm a consumer, I'm going to look at every digital path I can go down to try to not to talk
yeah,
to you, right? So if I can put an order in online, or I can request service, or whatever that is. And in healthcare, it's interesting. Some business segmentations have the benefit of the generational gaps can be narrowed depending on what it is, right? So, but in healthcare, not only do we have every generation as a consumer, as a patient family, but we tend to have a much older population, because frankly, my sons who are in college
right.
never go to the doctor, right? And so they're healthy. And so you kind of have the whole spectrum. And so it's interesting when you're in like my role or my peers' roles, and we're trying to kind of be leaning forward from a digital perspective. And the folks that are on the front lines that are talking to patients, they're talking to our grandparents, our grandmothers, and they're like, "Look, I mean, they're probably not going to,
Right.
download a mobile app, right?" Like, but the fact of the matter is you and I, if you don't have a mobile app, you're probably going to choose a
Right.
different hospital, right? I prefer to do everything on my mobile app, and I can get my test results, all that good sort of stuff. And so it's kind of a really kind of interesting world to be in healthcare, because we have a full spectrum from a digital experience of having to make sure that the folks that have very little interest in being digital, to the people that are, it better be all digital, or I'm
Right.
not doing anything
Right.
right.
And what we've seen is,
Yeah.
the people that kind of teeter on that edge, if you can make the experience highly personalized and radically convenient, and, they realize, oh, well, you know, that was a lot easier than calling someone. And once they have that experience,
Yeah.
then, um, I mean, then that's the way they want to consume healthcare.
It's kind of the mobile app has really been a game changer in most industries, and it's the stickiness. And so early on in my career, when I was in telecommunications, for example, I'd hear these marketing folks talking about like that stickiness, and so like, hey, if we start offering voice service that has stickiness, and like whatever, and so you try to bundle, solutions like whatever. But I'll tell you, the app really does it. I mean, the app, if your app works well, and I've got a peer, her name is Mona Bassett, and she is just outstanding. So she has a marketing communications background, and she's a game changer for us because she just has an exceptional vision for how to deliver those services. And so she has kind of revamped our mobile app and kind of made that whole experience frictionless and easy as possible. And on the same side, from a data perspective, you're seeing a lot of trends in healthcare where we're trying to give you your data a lot more accessible. So, for example, I just recently had an annual exam, and I got the results from my blood work before the physician even commented. And so it was like I got the results. I was able to go in there and see it. I'm like, oh, gosh, we watched the cholesterol. Well, a couple of days later, it was like, the physician's like, hey, you know what? Not only did you watch cholesterol, but here's how. And all of that was digital. The whole thing was all via the mobile app, and it'll keep my records in there, so I can kind of see the trends and so forth like that. If I need to do other appointments, and if I need to send that doctor a message, I could do it all right there in the app. So it's really that app piece has a tremendous amount of stickiness, and it does create a lot of loyalty. At the end of the day, we have to be really good at healthcare. You can add all the digital components you want to it, but our physicians and nurses and stuff have to be the skilled professionals that they are, and ours are highly skilled, and we are a great organization because of it. But being able to kind of just put that icing on the cake of having a very seamless digital experience is super, super
Huge.
important.
No, that's some great insight. Any other key initiatives that you guys are focused on right now that you think are worth, you know, telling the listeners about?
Well, from a technology perspective, we, like most organizations, we are on a cloud journey. We are delivering a lot more solutions via software as a service. The kind of making the data center more resilient as far as being able to burst to the cloud. We have a Google Cloud instance. We also have a Microsoft Azure instance, and we partner with companies like VMware and stuff, being able to kind of extend our environments and stuff. That's a game changer for healthcare, in a sense that disaster recovery is a big part of our responsibility, and our systems have to work. And so traditionally healthcare has invested a lot of money in that space, and cloud has really given us the ability to burst and not have to sink a bunch of capital investment into an environment that, frankly, we
Right.
hope we never use, right?
Yeah.
But it has to be there. And so that's a back end game changer for us. On the front end is we've actually partnered with Genesis, and so we're actually migrating our contact center component over to Genesis, and I'm partnering with Mona Bassett. She is actually, we are now kind of dovetailing Salesforce with that. So we're kind of using the Salesforce agent to kind of complement Genesis, and Genesis is a great platform for many reasons. It actually kind of out of the box just gave us a lot of multi-channel capabilities for being able to contact patients in various meeting them where they are, so to speak, whether you're email, text, phone, and kind of the Salesforce component makes us better at interacting with you and being able to kind of see that Stephen just had an annual physical, and he's probably calling about his follow up appointment, or like whatever. So there's a lot of this stuff that helps us be able to ease your experience in that regard. So the context center space is huge. The second thing that it does for us is it's a cloud based solution as well. So we're using Genesis Pure Cloud. We're not really having to host that environment in our data
Yeah,
center.
that's
So we can do
probably
that.
one of our most frequent initiatives in healthcare right now is that cloud contact center. I mean, when you talk about
Yeah.
what's possible from a self-service and artificial intelligence standpoint, once that's integrated with your EHR and with your CRM, I mean, the
Mhm.
efficiencies are huge. And I mean, I mean, it, from a business standpoint, I mean, it could be your largest source of revenue if you have that really humming. So, um,
Yeah.
Um, Best practices. What are some of the best practices you and your team follow?
Um, Honestly, I would say the number one best practice is just to be continuously learning. You know, one of my favorite quotes is, the Vince Lombardi quote where he says, we're going to continue to pursue perfection, knowing full well it cannot be achieved, but as a part of the process, we'll achieve excellence. And it's one of those things where I also carry from the Air Force is if something went wrong in the Air Force, specifically if an aircraft accident occurred or something like that, is there's a whole process of just basically going back and just totally learning everything that happened. When they dig into, well, how much sleep did the pilot have? When was the last time this maintenance occurred? And in our space, that just continuous, pursuit of perfection is super, super important. And so I think as a leader, you have to think about, how do I apply that? How do I look at everything we're doing with this goal of we could be a little better? And there's a balance of, one, knowing you can achieve perfection. So there is a risk sometimes of being over perfect oriented and you end up being slow and you can't deliver. So I'm not advocating that, but it has to always be on your mind. And so, we use a lot of ITIL practices. We're a ServiceNow shop. And so that brings a lot of value to the organization because that gives you data, it gives you the processes around continuous improvement and that sort of stuff. And so, the other best practice that we apply here is we kind of have this concept of products and platforms. And so the products is what we as an organization deliver to Intermountain Health, right? So a product would be like technology, or a product, would be digital. So we deliver a digital experience. And so, from a platform perspective, we kind of highlight some of these strategic platform partners that we have. One would be like Salesforce, for example. Epic is one of our EHRs, and the best practice is that as an organization, you need to kind of call out what those are. And ours are pretty simple, So it's like we have ServiceNow, for example, Salesforce. And but what that does is when you kind of call that out, and what we did is we created this culture of anytime that the teams are working on something new, or if they're refreshing something is end of life and is ready to be refreshed, they should ask themselves, does one of these strategic platforms do what we either need or what we're refreshing? And the goal there is to continue to take partnerships with someone like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow and try to go as deep as possible in those relationships because it
Right.
benefits both parties, frankly. But it also helps to over time start to simplify your technology stack. The only challenge you'll have with that best practice is that what you'll find is that you'll have platforms that both do the
Yep.
same thing. So you'll find that ServiceNow also does
Right.
some of the Salesforce stuff,
Yeah.
and so yeah, yeah. But outside of that, but even in that case, it helps you kind of pick whichever one's better at whatever it is the particular need is.
Um, yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly. So last couple questions here. This is a kind of bit of an ambiguous question, but where do you see the healthcare industry going in the future, and what do you think will be some of the biggest changes as time passes?
I think where healthcare is going in the future is moving to more of community-based health, value-based care. That is where it's going. And one of the things I love about the what Intermountain brings is our ability to find disruptors, frankly, in the market and say, hey, we need to learn from that. Or so Intermountain kind of has this history of growing itself by taking on those types of things, even if it means that it disrupts what we're doing. And so you think about the way that care is being delivered. What's happened over the last decade is the incentives to kind of make us more healthy is why your doctors and stuff are trying to guide you down that path. Because honestly, at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. And so, as caregivers, that's really been our focus, and will continue to be, is just making the population we serve healthier. And so from the payer's perspective, there's incentives to do that because it makes sense, for them. But also looking at the way that things are being disrupted in the market. So the folks that are consuming healthcare are becoming more and more um, driven by value. And so, like, I even think about years ago when my boys played sports, I would go to CVS to get their sports physical
Right.
because they were $40, right? And so, when my parents' generation, health insurance was totally different. I mean, it was like, they basically, health insurance paid for everything. But,
Right.
me and you, it's not that way. So that sports physical I had to pay for. And so of course I went to CVS to get it done. That's one of the things. And so for healthcare systems, we have to understand that we have to be competitive, frankly, and making sure we're giving the best possible care and meeting the
Yeah.
patients
I,
where they
I
need
love
us.
that you guys are focused on value and visibility and transparency. I think, you know, all the right things. All right, last question. If you could go back in time 5 or 10 years, what advice would you give your younger self?
Um, it's kind of funny. Like I was actually listening to a song yesterday, and I've heard this song a dozen times. I'm kind of a Luke Combs fan, right? I actually saw him recently at my son goes to Appalachian State University, and that's where Luke Combs went to school. And he did a concert at App State football stadium, so I was able
That's
to
cool.
go there. It's really cool. But the name of the song, I think the name of the song is called Today, and the song kind of goes where this is tomorrow talking to today. He said, "This is tomorrow here saying hello to today," basically
Mhm.
giving today advice. Today meaning what we're doing today, and it just really resonated with me just in the last couple of days. So it's kind of funny you asked this question because it's really true. Like you always want to be thinking about what I'm doing today is going to impact where I am in a few years. And so, I think the biggest advice is to just continue to keep your head down because everything that I'm doing today is going to make the next decade better or worse, depending on what I choose to do. And when I think about like those times that, man, I was just had my kids were young and I was trying to coach soccer practice, while going to school and serving in the military and like whatever, all that stuff I did in my 20s and 30s or whatever, man, that made my 40s pretty cool. So it's just a lot of work, a lot of investment. And so the advice to myself would be to never stop working hard because everything you do today is just an investment in
Love
tomorrow.
that. Stephen, thanks so much for your time this afternoon, this morning. And yeah, well,
Yeah.
again, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.